Buongiorno, benvenuti a questa domenica di Vapitali. Parleremo di aromi, parleremo in inglese fra un pochino. Sono molto felice e molto onorata di dare il benvenuto a Vapitali al dottor Konstantinos Farsalinos, medico cardiologo, ricercatore dell'Università di Patrasso e dell'Università dell'Attico Occidentale. Dal 2011 conta circa 100 studi sulla sigaretta elettronica e sul tobacco harm reduction ed è uno dei più citati studiosi della riduzione del danno da tabacco. Praticamente è la storia della scienza sulla sigaretta elettronica. Dimitris Agrafiotis, conosciuto forse meglio come Vaping Greek, è attivista da moltissimi anni negli Stati Uniti per la riduzione del danno, ha molta esperienza nel rapporto con le istituzioni politiche ed è anche lo sparring partner di Phil Busardo, che tutti conosciamo, che è qui in platea e che ci segue. E infine abbiamo Landl, direttore della World Vapers Alliance, rete di associazioni di consumatori, e organizzatrice dell'evento. Fra gli organizzatori c'è anche AMPV, l'Associazione Italiana dei Consumatori. Avrebbe dovuto esserci qui Carmine Canino, che purtroppo ha avuto dei problemi personali, per cui gli facciamo i migliori auguri e di ringraziamento da parte di Vapitali e da parte mia personale per questa organizzazione. Potete mettervi le cuffie, chi ne ha bisogno, perché cominceremo a parlare in inglese. Parleremo di aromi, ovviamente, intesi come gusti nei liquidi per sigaretta elettronica. So we start with Michael. Why are we talking about flavors? What is going on in Europe and in the rest of the world that we need to talk about it?
I mean, it's quite clear that vaping in general is under attack, I would say, and we see it especially in the US that the new target are the flavors, and they are coming. This is coming back to Europe as well, and we will face the same fights. And probably Dimitris can tell us more why it is in the US, but in Europe it's clearly the case. And I'm convinced that if politicians and the anti-vaping groups could ban vaping in general, they would do it right away. But I think they missed the train a little bit. It's kind of similar with Uber, that too many people use it already, so they can't ban it right away and outright ban vaping. So they set a new target, and that is the flavors. And I think they know that if they ban flavors, it's kind of the end to vaping as we know it, because 2/3 of vapers are using some kind of flavor. So they know what they do, and they have in flavors the new attack. And I think what we are facing as consumers is kind of an unholy alliance between those Puritan, no tolerance towards recreational drugs people, and they want to outright ban everything, I would say. Plus then we have this huge complex of organizations who their only existence is to fight smoking. And they did that for decades, and they were with limited success, I would say. And then came a new innovation in vaping and other alternatives. And then we saw smoking rate slashing. But it was not a policy or a regulatory work. It was bottom up from consumers themselves. So those kind of organizations feel a threat to their existence, I think. And if you add to those two groups this huge wave of misinformation about vaping in general and also on flavors, then we have the perfect storm. And I think that's why flavors are attacked. And our job is now business side, but also consumers, to inform politicians, the general public, and also the media that that flavors are an essential part of the success of vaping. And if they would ban it, we would have huge unintended consequences.
Thank you, Michael. Dr. Farsalinos, you published a few months ago a review of studies on flavors. So are flavors really useful in helping smokers quit?
First of all, I will disagree. Flavors is not a new target. It has been the target since the beginning. And the reason is that, it's very difficult to ban a product, but if you introduce a prohibition on flavors, it's the same thing, and that's why I will agree with you. It's almost the same thing as banning flavors, as banning the products, banning e-cigarettes. So if you were clever enough, and unfortunately the industry was not clever enough over the past few years, they would have known since the beginning that flavors will eventually become a target. If you know the history of smoking where flavors were banned, and I agree with the ban on the flavors for tobacco products, I'm talking about cigarettes, then you would have known that this is the easiest target. It is a target that affects and involves kids, which is, you know, a very emotional debate and a very emotional argument that we want to protect kids. So it was known for years that eventually we're going to come to a position that we are today, where the initial political battle in the US concerning flavors has moved to Europe very aggressively and very rapidly. So now we have a very strong debate in several countries initially, and now in the European Union, to ban flavors. So the industry and especially the consumers need to understand that they will not have products to buy if flavors are banned. Everything will be completely different. Vaping is going to be much more difficult, much less joyful and enjoyable for vapers.
And nobody will stop smoking.
And I think several of them are going to risk relapsing back to smoking. So it is the #1 priority to convince the authorities, I mean, we all know that adult, former smoking e-cigarette users are using non-tobacco flavors. All of them. You know, this whole expo, all these companies, all these exhibitors, they will not exist if flavors will be banned. We need to understand that as consumers, first of all, because I'm also a consumer. I'm an adult who was a smoker. I have managed to quit smoking with electronic cigarettes only after trying everything, all medications, everything possible. And it's going to affect me too as a consumer. So unless the consumers become organized through Vapers associations, like the ANPVU in Italy, a vaping association which has done a lot of work with Italian politicians in the European Union, trying to bring e-cigarette products in Italian prisons, which is a very important issue. We know that smoking is being banned in prisons all over the world. Unless they get organized and they use their main advantage, which is that they don't have any financial bias, they are not getting paid from the industry or from these products. They are simply consumers. So they are totally independent and their opinion matters. We saw that within the European Union in 2013 to 2014, just before the Tobacco Products Directive, they played a huge role in saving the product for themselves, for the consumers. They need to be activated once again. They need to think out of the box. They need to apply pressure to the regulators. They need to make them understand that flavors are not about kids. Flavors are about adult smokers and former smokers who need flavors in order to quit smoking and to remain smoke-free.
Because the real problem is that the flavor ban could be introduced with the next revision of the TPD.
Exactly. We don't have time, you know. We don't have time. We need to act now, everyone.
Dimitris,
Yes.
what is the situation like in the USA? Because we have the sensation it all comes from the USA. And now you have the FDA that is enabling a flavor ban without a flavor ban.
Yes, and to expand a little bit on the flavor ban in America, this did not happen today. Systematically and methodically, the government since 2015 have attempted to remove electronic cigarettes from the market. At first, in 2015, it was battery explosions. Battery explosions, people are dying, we need to ban electronic cigarettes. That didn't work. Then we had the nicotine addiction for the kids in 2017. Oh, the kids are getting hooked on nicotine. That didn't work. In 2019, 2020, we had Evali, So it's not just the flavors. The flavors is just a natural next step of eliminating the product without telling everybody that we're going to ban the product. So the United States was very smart. They said, well, we're not going to ban anything from the market, but you will have to apply to the FDA with a multi-million-dollar application and prove that your product, every individual product on the market, is a net public benefit for health. So in essence, even though they didn't ban the product, all these companies here, the independent companies, cannot afford to go through this process. And even the large, big tobacco companies that have applied to the FDA, no flavored product has been approved, or I should say authorized, to be on the market in America today. So in essence, every product in America right now is illegal that's being sold with flavors because nobody has gotten an authorization from the FDA. So it's not a ban, but in essence it's a ban. And exactly the same thing is coming with TBD3 here in Europe. People need to understand that unfortunately the East always tries to copy the West, and in good things, but also in bad things as well too.
Michel, they were talking about all what consumers should do and can do. You're doing a lot of campaigns. Tell us about your campaigns.
Yeah, thank you. I was very happy to hear that, because I think I fully agree, and I think consumers need to raise their voice wherever they can. There is a study of European politicians about their knowledge of vaping, and 1/3 of all MEPs have no knowledge at all about any alternative nicotine product. And at the same time, those people want to regulate it. So for me, it's mind-baffling how you think you can regulate something you don't even know. So I think there is a huge opportunity also for consumers to inform them, and I think the most powerful thing is to tell our own stories, because they can't dismiss our personal stories. And I used to work in the German parliament, and I always thought when politicians receive those personal emails and stories, they will just delete it and ignore it. But if they receive a certain amount of those kind of emails, that changes. Then they need to think of it and need to look into the issue a little bit, and it's not so hard to understand that vaping is less harmful than smoking. And that's what we try to do, to make it for the consumer as easy as possible to get in touch with the politicians. And on the other side, also to raise awareness in the general public. So at the moment we are running the Flavors Matter campaign, where we go into the countries where they are discussing at the moment the flavor bans, to try to stop that, also in light of the upcoming Tobacco Products Directive, because then those countries will play a huge role in the general regulation for whole Europe. So those are the two things we try to do with our campaigns: make it as easy as possible for consumers to get in touch with politicians and encourage them to tell their own stories, but also raise awareness for the issue in the general public with on-the-ground activities. We were in Brussels, we were in Stockholm, in The Hague, where all flavor bans are discussed already. And there are more countries coming, so I encourage everyone to check that out and just get in touch with the politicians. That is the most powerful thing we as consumers can do, I think.
And Dimitris, what should the industry do?
Yeah, everybody's talking about the consumer, which is great. Of course, that voice is very important. However, the industry needs to wake up as well, too. One of the biggest downfalls of the American industry is that they never came together and invest money in protecting their business. And by investing money, it's not only campaigns for awareness of what the product is and how it's being sold, but also research and data to show that the products that they're selling are going to adults, to go and show that the products are being used by ex-smokers. The industry here in Europe needs to bond together on a country-by-country basis, but also as a pan-European association through the existing groups, and raise a significant amount of money to combat what is coming with the TBD3. We need more research, we need more science, because at some point, the science evidence becomes such a huge mountain that not even politicians can overcome it. So we need to have that wall to be able to protect the industry in the future. So the consumer, of course, is very, very important, but also the industry to be able to continue to fund to protect the industry for the future.
And science, why is it so difficult to to get through science about
I will
electronic cigarettes?
first comment on what I've heard. The industry has always been, unfortunately, very naive concerning their approach towards the regulators. They think that they can just wait and everything is going to happen the way they want it to happen. The consumers, I fully agree that 1 or 2 emails are going to be ignored. But what happened in 2013 and 14 was that the MEPs were receiving hundreds of emails from consumers who were not even organized at that time. It was still too early. But they received hundreds of emails every day. And some of them were very angry emails because the consumers felt threatened that their product is going to be banned or effectively banned. And it worked because, I was in Belgium at that time. I had visited the European Parliament. I saw how they changed their minds because of the pressure applied by the consumers. Politicians don't know anything about vaping. Not just 1/3 of them, most of them. They have no idea. It's a matter of who is trying to influence them and how. The tobacco control movement, unfortunately, is not a scientific movement. Most of it is mostly a political movement with a political agenda of prohibition. That's the reality, unfortunately. And they have the power, they have the money, and they have the know-how to influence politicians. People like Bloomberg and so on.
When you talk about these political institutions of public health, the WHO...
Well, in fact, even scientists, some scientists in the tobacco control sector, they mostly work as politicians. I mean, they are using and manipulating science in order to promote their own agenda, rather than acting like scientists.
Would you say that the WHO is one of these institutions?
Well, I think it definitely is, because when you consider WHO as a health organization who should care about health, and you look at the messages discussing about nicotine and not about smoking, because they just want to put under the same umbrella all nicotine products, and they don't even care which one is more harmful or least harmful, then you understand that this is a political approach. It's not a scientific approach. And you need politicians and politics because it's politicians who regulate, but you need to act like a scientist and look at the totality of evidence. The WHO has systematically cherry-picked evidence. They're just using whatever fits their agenda. They try to ignore everything else. You cannot ignore science. They just try to ignore it through their reports. But it's going to fail. However, it needs a coordinated effort. A coordinated effort from the industry, of course, the consumers as a different independent sector, because they have many advantages, and the scientists through a purely scientific approach, and not through an approach of manipulating or cherry-picking evidence in order to promote everyone's agenda. So it's hard because science costs a lot of money and research needs money, and we don't have that money. Funding organizations usually decide to fund, again, anything that fits their own agenda and their own, predetermined position. So it is a tough battle, but I think, it's common sense. I think common sense should prevail, but it will not prevail unless we are very, very active, unless we wake up now, all of us, scientists, consumers, the industry, and we act very rapidly, because I think it's already quite late. We don't have time. We need to act very rapidly, very aggressively, be very active, and, expose the truth. Expose what's happening with adult vapers, many of whom, maybe the majority, are former smokers. They need to understand that.
And I think, Barbara, we really need to understand that the industry needs to do this by themselves. We are independent. We're an independent industry. In America, it was very funny because we expected, with Big Tobacco having flavored products on the market, that Big Tobacco would come and fight for their consumers. Because Big Tobacco's mission is, by 2030, we're going to be smoke-free. But we all know in the research that, you know, biggest survey that Farsalinos did on flavors, we saw that almost 90% of consumers use a flavored product, right? But when the difficult time came in America, Big Tobacco pulled all their flavored product from the market, which is easy because they also sell cigarettes, so it's not a problem. So don't expect that when TBD3 comes, we're going to have these huge companies that are going to come and save us and help us. No, they're not going to be there. So our industry needs to come together, especially here in Europe now. We know what's coming, and get organized now and have the evidence and have the consumers all educated. All the business owners that are sitting here, get organized and fight what we know is coming, and it's a de facto ban on the vaping industry as we know it.
But let's get back to science. What does science say about flavors?
I think that what Dimitris said is very clear. Most of adult e-cigarette users are using non-tobacco flavors, at least one non-tobacco flavor on a regular basis. We know that unlike cigarettes where people smoke usually the same brand for a large number of years, with e-cigarettes, you know, people like to experiment. They experience what we call a flavor fatigue or olfactory fatigue. It's a well-known, well-established scientific phenomenon where when you use the same flavor all the time, your receptors lose the sensitivity to the flavoring and you start not feeling the flavor itself. It starts becoming blunt. It starts feeling, it feels like it's a flavorless product. So it is very important for users to switch from one flavor to the other so that they will maintain their receptor sensitivity to the flavoring. This is a phenomenon that we wrote in a study we published back in 2013. But it's the phenomenon of olfactory fatigue is well known even before e-cigarettes were invented. But it is happening with e-cigarettes. And that's why flavors are important. Moreover, non-tobacco flavors is a further step away from tobacco cigarettes. You know, and vapers start using non-tobacco flavors which are even more different from cigarettes than the tobacco-flavored e-cigarettes are. So they're moving further away from tobacco cigarettes. This is going to prevent relapse. We already have studies showing that using non-tobacco flavors is associated with a higher odd of having quit smoking. So flavors are crucial. Every user knows that. Smokers will experience the need for flavors. I'll give you a very simple example. My mother, who is 73 years old, she was a 55 years smoker of menthol cigarettes. She's a vapor for the last 4 or 5 years, and she's using 2 flavors, cappuccino and berry. She's not using tobacco flavors. She has never used tobacco or menthol flavors, and she's 73 years old. So flavors are not about kids. Flavors are marketed for adults because adult vapors, adult former smoking vapors need non-tobacco flavors. This is a fact. We don't accept kids using cigarettes. There is a ban in Europe on the sales of these products to kids. This is what needs to be implemented. I don't understand why the politicians are admitting their failure to implement their own regulation, and just because of this failure, they have decided to punish adult vapers and punish also smokers who have a chance to quit and need the flavors, and they're not going to have flavors.
Yeah, the other questions I wanted to make, maybe Michael or whoever wants to answer. They say they want to ban flavors to protect kids. Do we really have this problem in Europe, or they want to solve a problem we don't have?
I mean, to be honest, especially those hardcore anti-vapers, I don't believe them, this argument that it's about kids. They just want to ban flavors and vaping for everyone. Because especially if we look at the numbers in the US, if you want to improve the life of kids, you should tackle definitely other areas of life. huge problems with binge drinking, anxiety, suicide rates. So vaping flavors would probably be the last problem I would tackle as a politician if I really want to improve public health for kids' lives. So I don't really believe this argument about kids. And I mean, all statistics show there is no gateway from vaping to smoking. As we have heard, adults like flavors as well. We once did a protest where we gave out flavorless ice cream to adults and filmed the reaction. And surprisingly, it turns out adults like flavors too. So I don't really believe this argument. I think it's about something else, namely banning and fighting vaping in general for adults as well.
I had a delicious tiramisu last night in downtown Verona. It was great. It was all flavored, you know, with coffee. But I want to point out something that nobody talks about. If they are banning electronic cigarettes so kids won't have access to them, what does that leave the market with? Cigarettes.
Of course.
So first we have to explain the relative harm. Even if a few kids are experimenting with electronic cigarettes, if we know based on the science that we have so far in the last 15 years of electronic cigarettes that they're at least 95% less harmful, where's the harm? If you remove this alternative choice, kids are going to continue to experiment with the only product that's left on the market, and that's going to be combustible cigarettes. So it's a double bad benefit for public health in Europe in general. You know, and at the end of the day, when I started smoking 35 years ago, there was no other options on the market, so I started experimenting with cigarettes, and I was completely hooked within the first 1 or 2 days of using the product. So we have to really look at the relative harm of vaping before we even discuss if we're doing this for kids or not.
Well, it is true that the argument coming from the US now to Europe is the vaping epidemic among adolescents and the gateway theory that e-cigarettes act as a gateway to smoking. So people start with the cigarettes and then they transition to smoking tobacco cigarettes. Well, the numbers completely reject this argument. In the US, since 2010, when vaping products started becoming popular, until today, the smoking rates in high school adolescents went from 15% to 5%. If there was a getaway to smoking effect, and if there was a vaping epidemic, we would have seen a rise in smoking, not the lowest historically levels of smoking among adolescents in the US. That's what we are seeing. We saw an accelerated decline in smoking rates in adolescents in the US. So the getaway to smoking theory is completely rejected. Concerning the use by kids, yes, a lot of kids in the US have experimented. Remember, there was no regulation about these products in the US until very recently. So products were completely unregulated. There were no rules, unlike Europe, which had the TPD, where we had the TPD since 2014, effective from 2016. The argument of the vaping epidemic is also false because we have seen and we have published research on that using surveys that the CDC has done in the US, that the vast majority of e-cigarette use among adolescents is experimentation. It's not regular daily use. And the vast majority of regular or daily users have been smoking or are still smokers. It's extremely rare to find a regular vapor among high school or lower kids, to find a vapor who has never smoked. You can't find people like that. Most of the kids who are using e-cigarettes regularly, they have experimented or have used tobacco cigarettes too. So there is no vaping epidemic, there is no getaway effect. In Europe, I don't think we have the same level of experimentation at all. So I fully agree, it's just an excuse. The target is the e-cigarette as a product. They know that through flavors they can effectively ban the product. It's not about the kids. No one has convinced us that it's about the kids. I mean, convinced us through evidence. And they're just using this as an emotional argument to make it a sensitive matter for parents, for the society, to show that they are, very sensitive towards the kids. But it's not about that. It's a direct punishment for adult smokers and for adult former smokers who have managed to quit with the cigarettes.
But now the question is pretty obvious. Maybe Dimitris wants to answer. Why do they hate electronic cigarettes? Are they against electronic cigarettes?
They don't hate electronic cigarettes. They really don't. They hate losing money from the sale of electronic cigarettes. Me and Phil Busardo always say this, and we use this argument a lot in the United States, but even more so here where, as Dr. Farsalinos said, electronic cigarettes have been regulated since 2016. We have laws existing in Europe for the sale of these products to minors. There are fines, there are penalties. At the end of the day, there's parents. Where are the parents to talk to their kids? We have the TPD, we have a nicotine cap, stuff that we didn't have in the United States. So since we have the laws on the book, it would make more sense for the governments across Europe to enforce the existing laws and punish the businesses that sell these products to the kids than punishing smokers that die at alarming numbers every year from smoking combustible cigarettes.
In fact, I was asking, has the industry done some mistakes? Is there something they have to regret? For example, labels or something?
Well, I think in Europe, labeling packaging has been much more responsible than in the US. Unfortunately, in the US, we have seen a lot of ridiculous stories concerning labeling and packaging, which, even someone who is not really biased against these products would think that these products are targeting youth. But this has not happened in Europe. So we cannot use the same argument because the market here in Europe, in my opinion, is not the same as in the US. The industry has been more responsible in those areas, in the areas of packaging, labeling, promotion, messages, and so on. But for all the rest, they are just sleeping, I think. The industry is sleeping. They're not seeing what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen on the next day. They only look at today. They look at competing between each other, and they don't understand that the whole sector is at risk. In the past, there have been industries who were attacked by regulators, but they united all the companies and they did their best to help regulators make the right decisions, because this is the goal for scientists, for consumers, for the industry. The goal is to help the regulator make the correct decision. They are not making the right decisions. They are making decisions that are going to result in the creation of a black market, completely uncontrolled market, black market products with zero standards of quality, zero standards on regulations on the sales to minors. They're going to leave minors with only one product to experiment, as Dimitris said. I don't see what's the benefit of a flavor ban, seriously. If someone wants to experiment with flavors, they're going to find flavors. It's very easy. E-cigarette flavors are not products that are solely used for e-cigarettes. They're basically coming from the food industry, and you cannot ban food flavors. So the flavors will be there. It's just going to make it more difficult and very inconvenient for an adult smoker to use flavored e-cigarette products. So they'll think, okay, it's a lot of a mess. I don't want to use that. I don't want to mess with that. Let me continue to smoke, or let me use a heated tobacco product. But for someone who wants to experiment, it's going to be easy to find products and mix food industry flavors with nicotine liquids and create their own uncontrolled, black market product. So, regulators need to be wise. It's in their own interest to make the right decision. And of course, it's in the interest of society too. So we need to push them to apply pressure in order to make the right decisions for society and for consumers.
And a prime example is the cannabis industry. Right now, for those of you here in Europe that might not know what's happening in America, in the state of California, a 21-year-old adult can go into a store and buy strawberry-flavored THC vape pen. But a 21-year-old smoker cannot go into a store and buy a 3-milligram strawberry-flavored e-liquid.
Without THC.
You can. It's banned in the entire state of California. Flavored vapor products are banned. You cannot sell them. So just think about what the doctor said is that the other industries have faced these regulatory hurdles, but they have come together. The cannabis industry is a prime example how they worked over the last decade to be able to, right now in America, be more acceptable as a product than this product that can potentially save 480,000 Americans that die every year from smoking. It's just
How long was
unbelievable.
cannabis banned in the US?
Decades. Decades.
The nicotine industry is becoming the new cannabis industry.
Exactly right.
Yeah, and I think there we will see one of the consequences if they go through with this ban. And we didn't mention it yet, but it's the criminalization of the consumer at some point. Because obviously, if you have a ban, you need to enforce it. And if I'm not sure how long it will take, but there will be the first person who goes to jail for vaping some flavor product. And we saw it in the US, what happens then. I mean, there are millions of lives destroyed for smoking a plant. And I just hope we don't go down this route.
A flavor ban will be more dangerous for consumers and
Absolutely.
will probably kill the vaping industry. So what are you going to do in the future? What are your next campaigns?
I mean, obviously the next big battle will be the Tobacco Products Directive. That will start soon with a consultation from the European Commission where they ask scientists, the general public and experts to give input. So the first big thing will be to drive consumers from our point there to tell their own stories plus give the Commission the evidence. I'm not sure if the Commission will listen to it. When we look at the Commission's history, they are very anti-vaping, and probably their position will definitely be that they want to have flavor bans included. So our main target will be the European Parliament, where our representatives sit. And I think we have seen in the past that there are some sensible people in there, and our own or all our goals should be to convince more of those people. So we will have a big campaign to directly engage with politicians, MEPs in the parliament, but also to raise the awareness in the general public, especially in the Brussels bubble. I think it is important, and in the nation states as well. I think there are some countries which might lean to our side. Probably Italy might block those crazy ideas. So I think it needs to be a full-on targeted campaign on national level plus on the EU level as well.
How about the involvement of the Italian Association? Let's talk a little bit about AMPU,
Yeah,
even if they're not here.
it's unfortunate that Camine can't be here because they are a member of the World Vapers Alliance as well, and they are doing great work here in Italy, and I think there you can see what influence consumers have. You had here yesterday the MEP Fiocchi. I think we need more examples like that, and I wish all national organizations would be that good like in Italy, because you can see that the perception of vaping is different than in other countries, like for example in Germany, where they increased taxes by 300%, so completely crazy. So if consumers would be that good like in Italy, we would be in a different situation. So what we try to do is to implement the Italian model around Europe and in Brussels as well.
For the Italian Vapers Association, first of all, I want to thank the association and Carmine personally for the honor of making me an honorary member of the association. I'm a consumer, first of all.
We all are.
In fact, my career as a scientist in tobacco harm reduction initiated at the same time that I became an e-cigarette consumer, basically a vapor. So these are parallel routes. Yeah, indeed. But they are doing a great job here in Italy and also on a European level. But the power of every association is their members. So consumers need to become proactive and they need to join the association. This is extremely important. The more the members in a consumer association, the more powerful the association becomes. So it's extremely important here in Italy and elsewhere in Europe. We are facing a very difficult battle. We are against billions of euros and dollars coming mainly from the US and from philanthrocapitalists like, that's the term, like Bloomberg,
I know what you're talking about.
who have no remorse attacking anyone personally, whether it's a consumer, industry, or a scientist. They don't care, they just want to promote their agenda. The battle is very, very difficult. Consumers should be at the forefront of this battle. We can win this battle, and I'm speaking as a consumer now. We need to be proactive. And consumers, through their associations, they need to provide the power to the associations by joining the consumer association. So I invite all Italian vapers to join the Italian Vapers Association and give their power to the association.
We have the membership forms at our stand right there, so everyone should sign up.
As someone who has seen everything before, some other suggestions for your
Well,
European,
we're a little bit lucky
colleagues?
here in Europe because this is the last year of the European Parliament, so they're not going to vote on anything now. So we're lucky from the sense that we have some time to get organized. We expect the TBD3 directive to be published sometime in the first quarter of 23, and then eventually it'll be voted. So we're looking at about between 18 to 24 months. It's plenty of time to take this thing serious. It's plenty of time for all the groups to come together and get organized. But I would also caution, we've already seen it for the couple of European countries that are trying to pass individual flavor bans. So don't think that we're gonna have to wait for TBD3 to come. Tomorrow you might wake up and in your country here in Europe, there might be a proposal to ban vaping. So you need to ban flavors, which in essence will ban vaping as well too. So you need to get organized on an individual country basis and of course join forces with the rest of the groups in Europe to be prepared and have the tools to fight any type of restriction that comes for flavors.
Ci sono domande dal pubblico? Stefano, vuole fare una domanda? Ok. Can you put your headphones on, please? You don't? I'm sorry. They don't have headphones.
Se no la faccio in italiano così.
Sì,
capiamo
però
tutti.
aspetta, non hanno le cuffie. Sì. Gliele dai tu? A tutti? Scusate. I thought you had them already.
I think.
Scusate, serve un'altra cuffia.
Do you hear anything? Yeah, but I don't hear anything.
Sarò molto breve. Con l'uscita del Regno Unito dall'Unione Europea, quale può essere il nuovo paese, diciamo, modello di riferimento per il vaping?
You understand? Okay. Okay. With Brexit, which country can be the leader in for vaping? Okay, from Greek.
Well, I was hoping France, but
Me too.
there is a big gap between the UK and any other country, unfortunately. You know, for those of you who don't know, in the UK, scientists were very reluctant initially to accept electronic cigarettes. I mean, all those scientists who are now basically promoting the use as a smoking alternative. At the beginning, and I'm talking about 2012, 2013, they were very, very reluctant. They were not convinced since the beginning. I remember me having huge fights in conferences with UK scientists But very, very quickly, they did their own research in their country, and that's how they were convinced very, very early about the prospects of these products. But it took some time, and it took some evidence in order to be convinced. They were not like this since the beginning, but they are monitoring the situation in their country, and they were convinced by the data. And that's what we are lacking in other countries. There are no studies, not even surveys in the population concerning the use of these products. Let me tell you that in Greece, where we had one of the highest smoking rates in the European Union, I did one survey in a representative population sample about electronic cigarette use in 2017, and since then we've done nothing. I mean, we don't have the money to do anything else, but no one else is doing any active monitoring. So they're saying all kind of nonsense about e-cigarettes being used by non-smokers and promoting smoking, but no one is doing the research. We don't have the money to fund that type of research. No one else is doing anything else, so they're just making arguments coming from nothing, without any evidence. The UK, they had their own studies, they saw the data, they were convinced by the data, and that's why they decided to accept and promote e-cigarettes as a smoking cessation tool. The only, I wouldn't say that it's quite close, but the only country that I see which could become the leader is France, but still there is a big gap. So there is nothing like the UK, nothing like Great Britain right now in Europe.
It's definitely not Germany. 100%, definitely not Germany. But I agree with the doctor. Me and Phil, we've traveled all over Europe, and what we saw in France is the closest, still far away from the UK, but closest to organizing. 5Vape there has done a fantastic job. The big manufacturers that we have talked to personally, we've seen their facilities. We know there's research being done in hospitals and universities in France. We don't know when that data is going to come out, but we do know that at least it's happening. They have a great opportunity in France if all the big players work together and continue to put the research out, put the ego and the competitive side, away, and focus on trying to educate the legislators. I think France has the opportunity to become the leader. And I think that smaller countries that are also under that same healthcare system, because a lot of people don't talk about why the UK is so pro-vaping, and that is because of their healthcare system. So the countries that follow that similar system, they have the opportunity as well too, if the industry comes together and provides the science to do the same thing, and number one, save money from the government from treating people that smoke, but also promoting vaping as an alternative to combustible smoking.
And France already has a vaping president, so
That's what I wanted to
he should
say.
publicly endorse it now that people should switch.
Yeah, not a lot of people like him though. I don't. That's.
But I think there are curious examples as well, because for example, Sweden, they are doing a great job in other areas, like with snus and nicotine pouches. So they have the lowest smoking rate in Europe. And at the same time, in 2 weeks, they are voting on a flavor ban, which makes absolutely no sense. Or the Netherlands, which have a very sensible drug policy, also implementing a flavor ban. So there are best case examples in other areas, but at the same time, they are very bad on vaping. So it makes absolutely no sense.
Even the previous DPD gave the right to every country to introduce any additional regulation they would want. And once it starts in a small number of countries, it becomes a domino effect. It becomes a domino effect. And it's very easy to spread, very rapidly everywhere. And there is no turning back. There is no coming back from that. And people need to understand, once the EU creates a regulation, it's going to take years for this regulation to change. The TPD was created in 2013, voted in 2014, and it's going to change in the next 2 years. So it's basically 10 years for a very good regulation, in my opinion, with some, points that needed some improvement. to be totally revised in the wrong direction, completely wrong direction. And if this happens, it's going to take another 10 years for this to be corrected, and I doubt if it will ever be corrected, because, you know, one of the main characteristics of European politicians is that they never admit that they were wrong.
Never.
Every next regulation is proof that they have always been right. That's how they create the regulation. So we need to make sure that they don't do the mistake. Once they do the mistake, they will never admit it. I think Italians and Greek politicians are exactly the same. We've seen that throughout the pandemic too. We're going to see that with the energy crisis. We're going to see that with the food crisis. So we know what to expect. So we should do our best to avoid, to prevent them from making the mistake. Dimitris said that we have 18, 24 months. It's a long time, as long as we start now. We don't have time to waste. It may seem to be a long time, but they have been working on this for the past 10 years. They have the tools to move forward and convince the regulators, and the other side has almost nothing. So it's a very tough battle.
I was in a meeting with a Greek taxation office last week. And
where, in Greece?
In Greece, yes. So the Greek Trade Association had a meeting with the taxation office. In that meeting, one of the advisors for the government told us, look, in Germany, they're going to put 300% tax, so we should do the same thing in Greece.
Why not?
And I told them, well, number one, it's not law yet in Germany. And I said, number two, the starting salary in Greece is 680 euros a month. How you can compare Germany to Greece to implement law? But this happens a lot. So when we look at good regulation in the UK, we should also look at bad regulation, because that can be copied to Italy, to Greece, and other countries as well too. The good stuff and the bad stuff.
Altre domande? Prego.
Hello. Every day we hear that in any European country the flavors are getting banned, as Dr. Dimitris also said. The flavors.
Can you raise your voice? I can't hear you.
You can hear now?
Si.
Okay. So every day in the European nations we hear that the flavors are getting banned, as Dimitris, sir, you said. So how it is going to impact the entire industry if, you know, each and every country they start banning these flavors as a whole?
Well, it's going to make it into a black market. You know, this industry thinks that no matter what the regulators do, we'll come up with a shake and vape, short fill, we can come up with something new. But eventually it reaches a point where the consumer gets tired of it, right? The consumer will follow the very passionate vapor, will follow whatever manipulation we come up with. But guess who cannot follow? Dr. Farsalinos' mom. She's 75 years old. I can't tell her, go to this store, buy aroma, go over there, buy PG at the pharmacy, oh, and then go in the dark alley over there and buy nicotine, you know, from the dealer. So even though we think in our minds that we can always fight the system, the right thing to do is not to have a black market and fight for the product to be used as intended. So I think if flavors are banned in the European Union, we're going to have a huge black market issue. We're going to have a lot of people getting adulterated, bad products, and it's going to hurt public health probably just as much as cigarettes will.
Altre domande? No. So I would ask, just to conclude, Dr. Farsalinos, in your review on flavors, you have 7 recommendations for politicians.
Oh, yeah, I've published and I've presented in conferences my opinion about proper regulation for electronic cigarettes in general, you know, as a product. We need to understand, and the regulators need to understand, that just because it has nicotine doesn't mean that it's a tobacco product. This is a really false argument coming from the US with an idea that if one of the ingredients of the product is coming from tobacco, then that makes it a tobacco product. In 2014, in one of my published studies, I said that the argument that if one ingredient is coming from tobacco, then the product is a tobacco product, is so ridiculous that if that was true, we would have to consider biodiesel a vegetable product and sell it in grocery stores, because biodiesel is coming from corn and other vegetable products. Well, you understand that this is a complete nonsense. This is published in 2014 in the International Journal of Drug Policy. You cannot classify a product based on the source of one of its ingredients. This is stupidity of the US law and the lawmakers who are use this trick in order to categorize anything they want as they want to. So it's, you know, from a common sense point of view, it's completely ridiculous. So we need to first to understand that e-cigarettes are not tobacco products and they're not like tobacco cigarettes. I think this is a key point in order to make appropriate regulations. And appropriate regulations means that they need to be, I mean, as a general philosophy, proportionate, risk proportionate first of all. So the strictness of the restrictions, the level of strictness and restrictions that we apply to the regulation depends on how risky the product is, what kind of risk it gives to the consumer. Risk proportionate, realistic. You can't ask for millions of euros to be spent by every company for every product in order to get authorized. It doesn't make sense. That's not realistic. It's an effective and de facto ban. And it must be different from tobacco cigarettes. It's not the same product. Even the purpose is not the same. Electronic cigarettes exist in order to substitute for smoking. That's what we in the public health community, that's how we want these cigarettes to be used. And unfortunately, we have millions and millions of smokers in Europe. So there is a huge market for electronic cigarettes without the need to target non-smokers, whether adults or youth. There is a lot of money coming from smokers in Europe, and there is also a lot of money to save for the governments if we convince European smokers to switch to electronic cigarettes. So it's a win-win situation. Unfortunately, the regulators are trying to make it a lose-lose situation. Lose for the industry, lose for the consumer, lose for health. Loss even for the government. So, proportionate, realistic, different from electronics, from tobacco cigarettes. The 2014 TPD was a very good starting point. There were some problematic decisions such as the nicotine cap. The nicotine cap is preventing smokers from making the switch. The 10 milliliter bottle volume limit, which is complete nonsense. It makes no sense. You don't see cleaning laundry products being sold in 10-gram boxes because they are toxic. These products are toxic, but they sell them in 1, 2 kilograms, 5 kilogram packages. You know, it doesn't make sense to limit the volume. We don't need to make the product more different, more difficult, and less flavorful, tasteful for the consumer. You know, a smoker needs to like the product in order to switch. Flavors are an absolute necessity. Without flavors, there will be no electronic cigarette. There will be no electronic cigarette for the consumer. There will be no money for the industry. That's two different things coming from a flavor ban. But the consumer will end up becoming, going to the black market in order to get the products. So we need to preserve and provide a competitive advantage for electronic cigarettes compared to tobacco cigarettes. What the regulators are doing right now is do the exact opposite. Restrict availability, accessibility, and appeal of the less harmful product, the electronic cigarette, and leave alone the tobacco cigarette. as the only product basically in the market. So they are eliminating the competition to the tobacco cigarette, which doesn't make sense from a health perspective. I mean, from any perspective, it doesn't make sense. I don't know why they're doing that. Well, we know why and how they're doing that, but we need to make it public and raise our voices. That doesn't make sense. That's not about health. That's not about public health in general. That's not about the personal health of anyone, including the kids. That's all.
Okay. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to add a couple of things. Obviously, we want to see the industry get organized with a TBD3, but also the industry needs to take some ethics and responsibility today. We do have, we have an environmental issue with disposables that are coming to Europe because it's the next hottest trend. We need to be very responsible with our packaging. We need to be very responsible with our labeling. We want to show the regulators that we're doing everything that we possibly can to keep these products out of the hands of youth, at the same time that we're asking them to keep these products on the market for the adults as well too. So it's time for the industry to grow up. We need to grow up as an industry. We're a viable multi-billion-dollar industry in Europe, and we need to start acting like one as well.
Okay.
I mean, from a consumer perspective, I fully agree with what we heard. So we are simply asking politicians regulate it according to risk, and that's it. And I think to achieve that and ensure that, I encourage everyone to visit our stand and sign up for our organization, but for Italy as well, because the more members we have, the more powerful we can interact with politicians.
Okay, that's all. Thank you for following us.
Thank you all.
I hope you found the discussion as interesting as I did. Thank you very much, Dr. Farsalinos. Thank you, Dimitris.
Thank you.
Michel. Adesso potete andare tutti a iscrivervi alle associazioni. Grazie AMPU e grazie a World Vapers Alliance.